Welcome to Things That Matter. It's great to be with you, whether you're tuning in on YouTube, Facebook, or on Twitter. We'd love to hear from you. You can always give us feedback or comment wherever you're watching this. We are reading the comments, and we'd love to answer some of your questions on future episodes of Things That Matter. My name is Josh Transky. This is Pastor Brian Brodersen of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, and each week we take a different topic and talk about the things that matter from that topic. And Pastor Brian, you just got back from a ministry conference up in the Northwest. And I know when you go to those things, there's always stuff that's fresh on your heart, on your mind. Explain it.
Yeah, I just got back from the Seattle area, and Pastor Wayne Taylor up in Seattle, he has been putting on this conference for many, many years. So I've been up a number of times. It's one of my favorite conferences to go up to. Wayne is just one of those guys who he's just done an amazing work over, 35, maybe close to 40 years now. And, 30 churches in the region planted out of his church, and probably 20 churches internationally planted. So Wayne's been one of those guys who just has been a church planter, And we were talking, he was telling me, he said at one time, he said our church is probably sort of maxed out about 2,000 adults, and it's probably about 1,500 these days. He said, but, instead of just continuing to kind of add numbers, we just kind of felt like we should just send guys out. And so they populated the Northwest, with great churches all over the state, and not just Washington, but also Oregon and over into, some of the eastern states there, and even guys from Canada, come down. So I love that. I love that conference, and just was there with those guys, and the theme was the Kingdom of God. Daniel Fusco was with us, Sandy Adams from Stone Mountain, Georgia, Ed Taylor from Aurora, Colorado. Ed was there as well, and we just had a really, really great time.
Oh, that's awesome. So as you're there, sitting there, what were some of the things that stood out to you? I mean, Wayne's been up there for many, many years, doing church planting. He's got great boys that are always impressive.
His sons, Jordan and Riley and Nick, are great kids. His daughter Amy, his family, his wife Kathy, they're just great people. He got great guys on his staff. He's got a youth pastor, Craig Finley, who's actually, Craig's in his mid-50s. He's been the youth pastor for 30-something years,
Wow.
But he just does a great job.
Wow.
Real youthful guy. And Brett Williams, who's a worship leader for a long time, he's pastored a church in the area. So just to kind of, Seattle's one of those cities that's very, it's very modern, it's very progressive. And just to see how the Lord used these guys up there, And so one of the things that I really like about that conference is there's a good number of young guys that turn up to that conference, So I always appreciate that side of it, to see how the Lord is still bringing young guys around there and getting them encouraged. A lot of them are guys that have gone out and are pastoring. But then there's I met a number of young guys, either newly married or young single guys that were there at the conference, just talking about, someday I'd like to go out. And so Wayne's all about church planting. Him and I have worked together for many years, and of course church planting is a big passion of mine. So the conference, even though that wasn't the main subject, we just talked about the need for, first of all, kind of recognizing that the kingdom of God, Jesus inaugurated it when he came. He's going to establish it totally when he returns, but it's here in the meantime. It's here in the present. And I think, one of the things we talked about is how sometimes we forget that, and how, the church is really that embassy of the kingdom here on the earth. And we're to be like an alternative to everything else that's going on in society. So we're a really fractured society today. And where do you look to find some sanity? Where do you look to find a model of how life should really be done? And you've got the conservative camp, you've got the so-called progressive camp, and you got a bunch of other stuff in between. But the church is to really stand out. So that was kind of you know, even though we didn't really sit down and compare notes and say this is where we're going to go and this is what we're going to do, just seemed like the Spirit was kind of, you know, there's always those, like a thread that will go through the conference that's kind of the same thing as being repeated in different ways by different guys. So that was kind of the emphasis.
Wow. So when you go to these conferences, and guys interact with you and they ask you questions, what type of questions are you typically getting in that setting?
Mostly stuff to do with ministry. You know, somebody's out there and maybe they're discouraged, you know, so they want to talk a little bit about that. Or maybe they're just getting started and they're wondering like what to expect. So something like that. Or, you know, maybe they've been doing it for a while and they've kind of come up against something that they haven't experienced before. So they say, hey, have you ever experienced anything like this, you know? Yeah, so stuff like that. You know, in the end, it's kind of just pastoral stuff. Or guys, you know, I want to go here. This is what we're praying about. What do you think? I had a young couple. They have a real burden for the Basque people, Basque country in northern Spain. And so they were asking me, you know, what should we do as we think about going there? And first question I asked is, have you ever been there? No, they hadn't been there. So I said, well, you know, I think maybe trying to take a trip, you know, even though it's not absolutely essential to do that. I mean, there are people that, you know, never had gone to a location, went to the mission field, stayed there for 40 years, you know.
Yeah.
I think of the Drowns in Ecuador, they did that. So, but I said, hey, you know, you ought to go, just spy out the land, number one. Secondly, you ought to connect with the people that are already over in that part of the world. I gave them names for, you know, 4 different guys in the region. So, you know, stuff like that. But then their particular situation, they had a really difficult challenge because they have a child, I think a couple years old, but they have a baby on the way that has, there's something genetically the matter with the child. And the child was not expected to live even through the pregnancy term. And if the child survives through the term, then the child won't live to be more than 2 years old. So, you know, this is kind of a big burden on them too. You know, so we talked and we prayed. You know, it's really just a great time of ministry. And for me, it was super cool because my oldest son went with me, and he's super tight with Jordan Taylor and Riley, and we all went out and had coffee and stuff like that.
Sounds like a great conference.
Yeah, and you know, it's Seattle, so you got to have coffee. Do all of this.
Did you guys have good weather up there?
We did. We actually had really nice weather. It was, you know, it was blistering hot down here, and it was nice and sunny, but a little more mild up there. Wow. So it was good. But you know, Josh, one of the things I'm going to add to this is, so we're, you know, the kingdom of God is the theme, like I said. So, and man, all the guys did a really, really good job. Really good stuff. Great insights. Great perspective. I preached a couple of messages on that, but one of the messages I preached on is the passage in Matthew that Jesus talks about the kingdom of heaven suffers violence and the violent take it by force. So just breaking that down, you know, what does that really mean? And it, you know, the obvious part is that the kingdom of heaven, the work of God, suffers the violent opposition that has always come against it. But then what does the violent take it by force mean? And I was talking about how, you know, there has to be violence on our part as well, not violence like we normally think of it, like a harmful type of a violence, but a violence in like the exerting of great energy. And, you know, you talk about like the violence of the waves broke something up, or the violence of the wind ripped through and shredded this. And it's that same kind of thing. Because there's opposition to what we're doing, we have to be determined to push back on that opposition. We can't be passive and expect that the kingdom of God, because the whole idea of the violent take it by force, the idea is that Jesus is telling us you got to take the kingdom to people. You have to take it to them because there's this resistance in it getting to them. So you have to take it to them, and you have to push through. So you have to have a certain amount of violence in the good sense. So that seemed to resonate, and talked about, you know, violence in prayer, violence in just our witness through love and good works, violence in just using all the creativity and wisdom and everything else we can marshal to get the gospel to people that haven't heard it before. So,
yeah. No, that's huge. I've been meditating on that passage, and that's what's come to mind with church planting and looking towards Baltimore, because I operate in my comfort zone.
Yeah.
Way with big margins without getting uncomfortable. But man, church planting, requires that you get into a place where you're uncomfortable regularly, and it's all for the sake of seeing the kingdom of heaven advance, and I keep going back in my own life to that point of like, no, it's not about me being comfortable or feeling good about the day. It's really about something bigger than me and my comfort zone. So that's encouraging. Awesome.
Yeah, and that's the way we've got to go about it. So.
I love it.
Yeah, that's good.
All right. Thanks for tuning in to Things That Matter. It's great to spend a couple minutes with you each week. We appreciate you tuning in and helping us share these episodes with your friends and family on social media. Just hit that share button and pass the show along. You can also tune in on our podcast. It's the audio version of this show. It's available on your favorite podcasting app. Thanks for the comments, the questions.
And one last thing.
Yes.
Next broadcast, we hope to be back in our studio.
Yes, as long as it's working. Otherwise, we'll be right here. Thanks for tuning in to Things That Matter. Looking forward to seeing you again soon. God bless.